Chinese state media say rival Palestinian factions, including Hamas and Fatah, have signed a declaration in Beijing to unite the two groups. The two have competed for power in Gaza and the West Bank for years. Now, the so-called Beijing Declaration is aimed at strengthening Palestinian unity and involves more than a dozen Palestinian factions. Hamas is considered a terrorist group by the U.S., EU, and other states, but not so by China. Israel swiftly rejected the agreement, adding that Hamas's rule, quote, will be crushed.
It's a pact that could end years of infighting between rival Palestinian factions. Representatives from Fatah and Hamas have inked what host China calls a national unity deal. It also includes a dozen other Palestinian groups. The outcome has defied expectations, as previous attempts at bridging their divisions have failed. Hamas runs Gaza, while Fatah controls parts of the occupied West Bank. After feuding for nearly 2 decades, they have committed to a new chapter.
Today we sign an agreement for national unity, and we believe that this is the path to completing our journey. We are committed to national unity, and we call for it.
China, unlike many Western nations, does not consider Hamas a terror organization. The pact is a major diplomatic coup for broker Beijing. China is keen to bolster its influence in the region and to present itself as a peacemaker on the international stage. After repeating calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, Beijing laid out its vision for the territory post-war.
The second step is to uphold the principle of Palestinians governing Palestine and work together to advance the post-war governance of Gaza. The war has left Gaza devastated, and an early start to post-war reconstruction has become an urgent issue in the next stage.
But Israel has vowed to eliminate Hamas for carrying out the October 7 terror attacks and firmly rejects their involvement in governing Gaza. The future of the Strip is a major sticking point as Israel and Hamas weigh an internationally backed ceasefire proposal.
For more on this story, let's cross over now to Ahmed Aboudouh in London. He is an associate fellow with the Chatham House Middle East and North Africa program. A very warm welcome to DW News. We have a lot to unpack here. I'm curious, first of all, previous declarations of this kind have fallen apart. So how likely do you think this one is to hold?
The short answer is I don't expect major developments out of this declaration. And I think it will not produce real unity or reconciliation because the disagreements between Fatah and Hamas especially are structural and are not related to light issues. And these issues are related to inclusion of Hamas and Fatah into the PLO organization, elections, and deep changes in ideological doctrines that govern both Fatah and Hamas, and also the belief in the peaceful negotiations with Israel to reach peace under the umbrella of the Oslo Accord. So these issues were not discussed, and I don't think they will go away anytime soon.
So as far as we know, none of these fundamental structural issues were addressed in the deal. Were there any areas where you saw breakthroughs that you would say are notable?
Some of them were encouraging. The elections, for example, it was on the declaration. Also, the formation of a unity government, which is a Hamas demand for so long, and Fatah didn't want this to happen. It is included in the declaration, but the problem is the declaration is predicated on a decision by President Mahmoud Abbas, who opposes all this. Secondly, it doesn't include any concrete time frame or implementation mechanism for these fruitful outcomes to become reality. So just like other declarations and agreements in Cairo, Sana'a, Mecca, Algiers, and Doha, and even in Moscow in February, I don't think they will lead to any concrete developments on the ground.
It is interesting, though, the devil, of course, in the detail. But how likely would you say it is that at some point in the future we do see what they've basically agreed to, which is the formation of a unity government for the administration of post-war Gaza?
The two sides came very close to agreeing to the formation of a unity government in February. But in March, the President Mahmoud Abbas ignored that, and he formed the Prime Minister's Mohammed Mustafa's government, which is in place now. We will have to wait and see if a declaration comes from the presidency saying we have to dissolve this government for the sake of the new proposed unity government. This will be a major change. Secondly, I think the main objective of Fatah is three or consists of three elements. The first is it wants to increase its popularity in the street and within factions within Fatah who don't follow Mahmoud Abbas, who are angry with the language coming from the presidency towards Hamas. Second, it wants to block Hamas inclusion into the PLO. And third, and most importantly, I think, it has to deal or prepare with for the uncertainty coming from the United States. Now that President Biden decided to pull out of the elections, I think Mahmoud Abbas is predicting uncertainty if Trump becomes president. And we saw this behavior from Mahmoud Abbas in 2020 after President Trump proposed the deal of the century negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis before.
So if we do get a Trump administration, tell us a little bit more about that. This uncertainty that Abbas is feeling, you say, what will that translate to in political terms?
When Trump was elected, he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He kicked out the PLO office, which was in Washington, and he cut funding to the Palestinian Authority. And he exerted great pressure on President Mahmoud Abbas to sit at the table with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss this deal. The Palestinians didn't reach consensus for this to happen back then. So Mahmoud Abbas restored to surrounding himself with all the factions he had differences with, including Al-Jihad and Hamas back then, to show unity in the face of this pressure. I think Mahmoud Abbas' calculations now is that this might be repeated if Trump would win the elections in November, and he's trying now to show some unity with the help from Beijing that he can defy or stand up to any pressure that would come from Washington. Again, trying to force Mahmoud Abbas or the Palestinian factions to sign a deal that they don't want to sign.
I do want to also ask you about the role of China in these negotiations. Would you say this is a win for Beijing, having sponsored this deal? It has been trying to position itself as a mediator on world issues.
I think it is a diplomatic win. We are now living the same days that followed the success of Chinese mediation between Iran and Saudi Arabia in March 2023. China's objectives out of this, China wants to position itself as a responsible, rising major power that is interested in pushing forward peace through dialogue and consultation and through development. These talks give China this banner and which can promote Chinese vision for international governance, which is alternative to the rules-based international order in the future. Second, China knows that it doesn't have an entry into any future negotiations between the Palestinians and Israel, because Israel would not want to replace the United States as the only mediator. So the only way to have a role in this biggest headline in the world and biggest conflict is to raise and increase its influence over the future Palestinian state by uniting the Palestinian factions and Palestinian institutions and guarantee a seat at the table in any peace arrangement in the future. And the most preferred scenario for China, as President Xi Jinping said many times, including in a BRICS summit, that the peace process should be taken over by a UN-led Peace International Conference that is multilateral and where China plays a very important role on par with the United States.
I'm curious where you see things going from here. Now that this deal has been struck in Beijing, will we see further talks between the two sides to try to flesh out additional details, or is this really just a much more broader show of unity?
I think we will see some small talks at the level of general secretaries on all the factions and parties, and this will be technical in nature. They will discuss a lot of details and issues, including the future governance of Gaza and reconstruction after the war, but all will be predicated on the end of the war, first and foremost. This will rely on the United States' ability to get a deal over the line before the elections in November, and if Israel would accept a future role for Hamas in the governance of Gaza, which President Benjamin Netanyahu rolled out already. Secondly, I think the Chinese will be interested in supervising further talks, just as they did with the Saudis and the Iranians. They will host more meetings between the Palestinian factions in Beijing going forward to make sure that they can build on this declaration.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. That is Ahmed Aboudouh with Chatham House. We appreciate your insights.
You're welcome.